Badlands, right into Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, welcome once again to this week's Breaking History on Badlands Media, where we take breaking developments and introduce historical context in order to get a sense of causation and why things are happening, not just to analyze what is happening, but the why is so important, but that requires a sensitivity to the historical dynamics, the battles shaped by ideas that are either in alignment with natural law or out of alignment, out of whack with natural law, that are otherwise known as evil lies, masquerading as truth, that do a lot of damage. So here we are living in the wake of a lot of bad ideas and a lot of potential for the future that's shaped by the existence of good ideas that people have fought and died over for the cause of freedom, for the idea of a human species made in the image of a living, loving, reasonable creator, which has expressed itself in all parts of the world at different times, that have gone through moments of great beauty and goodness, where populations have grown, have increased their emancipation, where empires, the belief in hereditary systems, have reduced in their influence as people got more smarter, more dignified. And that occurs whether you look at the deep history of India, of China, of the Muslim world, of the Christian world, of the Buddhist world. There's always this interesting dynamic. So here we are once again. I'm with Ghost of Bass Patrick Henry. Gordon, how you doing, Gordon? You're on mute, by the way. You're totally on mute.
Sorry, that was a rookie move. Great, Matt. How are you today?
Cool, man. Yeah, no, I know. I love talking to you because your mind has really tuned itself in a really, really interesting way to focus on a lot of the same dynamics that I've been thinking about too for a long time. And we've been obviously discussing over the past weeks the issues of Eurasia, Middle Eastern dynamics, Indochina. This is obviously really a major battlefront right now over what the coming centuries are going to look like. And today, I know there's a lot that's happened regarding India and Pakistan, and also Iran, that will play into some conversations that we're going to have regarding some anomalies we're going to dissect. So I don't know if you're ready to jump into it right away, or you want to say any introductory remarks on your end.
Well, just the only introductory remark that I'd make, just because this isn't directly tied to anything we're talking about today, but I thought it was very apropos to share it because of just what we've talked about on the show for the past, I guess, few months now. There's a Fox News article that we covered on Badlands Daily on Monday that talked about a CIA agent who was exposed, a former CIA agent who started a company that works in Qatar, that was exposed for helping the Muslim Brotherhood subvert Congress, specifically subvert Ted Cruz, who was in the process of designating the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. And they had the documents, they had the actual, it was called Project In-Game. They had the PDF that this company had written up for the Muslim Brotherhood, had tied the Muslim Brotherhood basically to the Qatari government, and said that an attack on Qatar is attack against the Muslim Brotherhood, an attack against the Muslim Brotherhood is attack against Qatar, and just really put it out there. And the guy's name is Kevin Chalkner, by the way. That's his name. He's a U.S. citizen, a CIA agent, and he was working with the Muslim Brotherhood to subvert the U.S. government, based out of Qatar. So just really, really fascinating stuff. There's a lot of other things coming out too that, tying CIA to some of these terrorist organizations. Really, really great timing and fascinating. And I think that's going to feed into what we're about to talk about, even though we're not talking about Qatar or Arabia. We are actually talking about Persia today.
Yeah, we are. And it does play in quite well, just always being aware that the rise of these various terrorist groups have not occurred organically just as some sociological phenomenon, as you and I have been discussing for many, many weeks and months even. You'll always find the hand of Anglo-American and Zionist intelligence operations behind the origins, the growth, the success of any of the terrorist groups that we want to look at. And I haven't found any example of any authentically emerging terrorist organization. I just can't find it. Every time I scratch the surface of a narrative, there's the hand of the British Empire and their Anglo-American compatriots. And whether we look at the case of Mujahideen al-Khalq, it was a 1965, an Iranian terrorist organization, which Hillary Clinton took off of the international terrorist list that the State Department had maintained. She removed it in 2012, this group that had openly killed civilians in acts of terrorism for many, many years. But at the same time, they had been, while they were still even on the U.S. State Department terrorist list, they were still used as assets of the U.S. And even NBC News, I was looking at it, did a little thing back in 2009, pointing out that Israeli and Mujahideen Khalq operations were together working to kill Iranian scientists, of which there were literally something like 80 Iranian scientists who have been assassinated over the course of the past 15 or so years. Not just nuclear, I mean, a whole variety of scientists as part of the whole ongoing asymmetrical warfare operation. They were used to overthrow the Shah back in 1979, and then they continued to be used to overthrow every single government in Iran. It's like you just can't satisfy them, but they're always just like the modern case of ISIS today, always receiving logistical support, protection, basing operations, other things from American intelligence, as well as British intelligence, always there on the ground, even working with Saddam Hussein in the 80s against Iran when there was the Iran-Iraq war. That was Mujahideen Khalq. And for the case of today, we're going to go outside of Iran for a moment and then come back to it, because you had this very, very interesting thing that nobody knew how to think about on January 16th originally, which nearly we were being sold, and it was easy to believe at the time. I was a bit scared that this could be a war between Iran and Pakistan. And it was really wild, because all of a sudden Iran launches missiles into Pakistan's territory. And the Pakistanis, the diplomats all around the world at the UN are freaking out. They're railing against Iran, saying, "What are you doing? You're abrogating international law. We're going to retaliate." And there's demands from the people to retaliate. They retaliate. The next day, there's all of a sudden Pakistan missiles launched into Iran. Oh my God. Well, it's scary, right? Some people have died. But the interesting thing is that within a blink of an eye, by the next day, January 18th, or maybe it's the 19th, all of a sudden, declaration of total peace. All is good. Everything's forgiven. What happened? This is the interesting thing of what happened.
This article that you sent me, it's almost like this article like manifested like out of my imagination, because you talked about like my brain being in tune to certain things. And the thing that I'm really becoming tuned in is, as you said earlier, as I scratch the surface of all these different groups, I used to kind of have this idea that some of these groups were organic, some of them were Western intelligence derived. The more I scratch at it, and the more I look at it, and the more I like listen to you and Sean Morgan as y'all discuss it, and you were making connections for me that I already knew about these two things. I didn't realize they were connected. And then I go look at it more and more. It's like I'm moving away from, like you said, I'm moving away from any of it's organic. It's all just being facilitated by bad actors. Before we get into the article, because this article was amazing, let me just one of my history professors always taught me that geography is the foundation of understanding. So let's just real quick, for the sake of the audience, explain what we're talking about. So we're talking about Pakistan and Iran today. The green is Pakistan, the orange is Iran. Persia, as like traditionally as we know it, would be basically the Iranian axis from Turkey all the way to Pakistan. That's kind of considered the Persian Empire, the Persian axis. And then real quick, I like to look at maps like this because it kind of gives you a sense of the topography. The brown are mountains. Afghanistan, extremely mountainous, like arid desert-like. And in the green, you have the more lush green areas. So Iraq, the Fertile Crescent, you have this is where like civilization all began. Pakistan actually has a lot of green in it. And then over here, we will look at, these are the two areas we're looking at. Balochistan, which is a region in Pakistan. And then is it Sistan, Balochistan?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's important to know that. So this is in Iran, this is in Pakistan. Islamabad is the Pakistani capital. And then if you look at, this is where it gets really fascinating. These are the subgroups of the ethnic groups of Pakistan and Iran. And one thing I didn't know about Pakistan is that it's a acronym. So Pakistan actually stands for Pushtun, Afghani, Kashmir, India, I think, and then Sindhi. I think so. It's like Pakis and then Stan is like land of. So it's like the land of the like 4 or 5 ethnicities, and then you see them right here. But that, and then, you know, they've been fighting over Kashmir for a long time. But I didn't know that about Pakistan. Is that's like officially like where like the Western derived name comes from. Are those groups? So you can see how the Balochi people are in both Iran and Pakistan. So you see this a lot in the Middle East, where you have these ethnic groups that cross these national boundaries, because these national boundaries were drawn up by the British. And so that's led to a lot of conflict over time, because these people see themselves, for the most part, as one people, but they're divided up in different countries. So, and then this is the map that kind of just shows these attacks that we're going to talk about. So here's the attack, showing the attack from Iran into Pakistan. Then there was a subsequent attack from Pakistan into Iran, and then they show some of the related incidents that were going into Syria and Iraq, which we're not going to talk about today. But and then Iran, real quick, you just see there's a number of different ethnicities, but Persian is really what, generally speaking, most Iranians identify as. If you ask them what they are, they'll say they're Persian. You see that with the pink. So just wanted to give everyone their bearings before we speak further. I think it's important to understand geography and some of those details.
Oh yeah, that's super important indeed. No, and I think, yeah, just having that mental mapping as well. That's again why I really enjoy working with you, because I knew that your mind was going to work in a similar thing. Because I, just to show you what are the images that I prepared as well going into this, I was like, okay, let's look at a map of the terrain a little bit, just to appreciate where Pakistan and Iran, where they fall, right? What about Balochistan? Like, what is that?
Same map, yeah.
Yeah, right. Now I think the interesting thing here is that when you look at the first, can you actually show your image then?
Sure. Yeah.
The cradle image there showcasing the attack.
You go ahead and speak, and I'll drive.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, just quickly there. So you had the launching in of a strike here on the right hand side between Iran and Pakistan, and then retaliation back and forth. Now this is zone of where all of the missile strikes hit. They were all precision strikes. All precision strikes. They were all falling into Balochistan. It's kind of like Kurdistan. If you want to know, if people are like, I never heard of Balochistan, it's because it doesn't exist as a country. But as you pointed out, is an ethnic regional group of Sunni Muslims mostly, who speak a specific language. It's an Indo-Aryan language, whatever Indo-Aryan even means. I don't even know what Indo-Aryan means anymore, because even when you look at some of these terms we use, it's like they're so contaminated by British imperial anthropologists that want to impose some Aryan supremacy onto their interpretation of the different brown races of the past. So even the word Indo-Aryan languages has a fallacy to it. But all that to say, it's of a similar language group as Urdu, as a variety of the other dominant language groups. But this zone has been used for terrorists in Pakistan, like the Balochistan People's Liberation Army, which is like this CIA-controlled pseudo-Marxist terrorist group that has carried out decades of terrorism in Pakistan. And then to avoid capture, they will go to Iran, but they'll go to the Balochistan zone within Iran to safeguard themselves while they wait to do other terrorist attacks against Pakistan, usually against infrastructure being built up along the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a high degree, like the vast majority of terrorist incidents over the past 7 or so years has tended to occur along hydroelectric dams, rail lines, power development projects that Chinese and Pakistani engineers are co-building together. So that's also interesting, that these terrorists often will go after infrastructure, whether in Africa or Middle East or anything. So on the one hand, that's what was attacked by Pakistan in Iran, and Iran in turn attacked the Jaish-ul-Adl. It's an Iranian Sunni terrorist group, often working with the Mujahideen Ikhalq. Again, and they will do their terrorist activities in Iran. Even ABC News did a coverage saying that this group has been secretly encouraged and advised by the U.S. government since 2005. That was ABC mainstream news back in 2006, covering that and acknowledging that. And hundreds of people have died, probably thousands, by this grouping. They're the ones who got attacked by Iran first. And again, surgical strikes on both sides that we were all afraid was going to escalate into a potential war between a Shia versus Sunni Muslim grouping, as has often happened throughout history with these types of divide to conquer manipulations. But as we pointed out, all of a sudden, everything is forgiven by the 19th of January. Everything is forgiven, and an acceleration of normalization of relations is announced by the leaders of the representatives of the two countries, with massive economic security and defense cooperation agreements that are agreed to. Now, the interesting thing in that Cradle article that we both read is that there were surgical strikes again, and no air defenses. No defense systems were activated on either side, indicating a high degree of top-down coordination to basically say, well, if the conventional channels of trying to get international support to do something about the massive terrorist problem. Many of these terrorist groups, by the way, have headquarters in London. That's why they call London the Londonistan. Many of these countries like Iran and Pakistan and India and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh have lobbied the British government since the 90s to shut down the headquarters for the Tamil Tigers, the various Balochistan terrorist and separatist groups. They've been lobbying to get London to shut down their these offices, and the response that they get from the British Foreign Office is always the same. Like, hey, look, these groups might be doing illegal things in your countries, but they're obeying British laws, so we're going to let them be because we're liberal. We're a liberal society. We don't judge as long as people abide by the rule of law in our country, ignoring the fact that there have been actual London bombings that have been protected by the MI6 that have been using these groups. But we'll ignore that. So now they just said this seems like a very creative way of getting at this actual terrorist problem, agreeing to just, shut down two of the more troublesome terrorist cells, and then work together. So I think that this is just very interesting, considering as well what gain Iran and Pakistan have to work together. I want to show something quickly as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you still see my screen? I don't know if you're still sharing my screen.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to show this real quick because I think this is also helpful, is just to see whenever you're talking about this area, just talking about the Shia Sunni breakup. So red is Sunni, blue is Shia. They're showing Wahhabism where this used to be predominant. That's around Riyadh where Wahhabism comes from, but really Wahhabism is just the extreme form of Sunni. But yeah, so you see that Pakistan has a lot of red in it. Iran is obviously like the epicenter of blue, which is Shia. The purple is kind of irrelevant. But yeah, so then they have a separate map that just shows just Shia by itself, so you can kind of see. So it's easy to understand when you look at this map and like what Matt just explained. You can see how Tehran is all the way over here. This is the capital of Iran. Islamabad is the capital of Pakistan, and you can understand how far away these two regions are from their capitals, like their centers of government, and how the ethnic commonality there would benefit a group like the CIA if you were setting up these terrorist groups, these proxy militias, and how they'd be willing to work with each other and help each other, even though they're one side is Pakistani and the other side's Iranian. They still see themselves both as Balochi. And so it kind of similar dynamics to what you like heard about in Russia and Ukraine, how the Ukrainians identified as Russian, they're ethnic Russian, similar kind of dynamics. So you could see how that would be really beneficial to a group to people who were trying to manipulate the situation and get them to, you have Iranian proxy militia operating in Pakistan, and you have a Pakistani group operating in Iran. And Matt, you sound like Kyle is Just Human. For those who watched Evolution Power Hour, we're talking about this because you're literally sitting there explaining how these two nations seem to be fighting each other according to the MSM, but really they're blowing up terrorist groups. That Iran is blowing up an Iranian terrorist group in Pakistan, and Pakistan is blowing up a Pakistani terrorist group in Iran. But both groups are Balochi operatives.
Yeah,
being backed by Israel in the United States, and that's openly being said in this article.
It's absolutely fascinating stuff. And I think one of the important things that article brings up as well is that the Chinese role mediating these creative conflict resolutions is vital in the whole thing. Because on the one hand, just keeping in mind what you just showed, this is what the Belt and Road Initiative is right now. This is on the top of the mind of the Bernard Lewis, Samuel P. Huntington-minded game theorists in Washington running the think tanks, running the Pentagon, what they're freaked out about is what was brought online in 2013 as far as the new international development strategy of the Belt and Road Initiative that China launched, that has now recruited something like 143 countries to varying degrees that have signed on to cooperate on the BRI together. This has created a climate of long-term development. So there's real long-term 10, 20, 30-year strategic thinking right now about creating a climate where business can actually have the confidence to invest in regions that had formerly been too volatile for any entrepreneur to want to invest in anything going on in the Middle East, because it could all blow up. So you're not going to do it. So all of a sudden you have like a climate of stability where all of a sudden there's all sorts of opportunities. Millions of jobs are being created. And this is something which back in 2022, I was just looking at this morning. There was, for many years, there was in existence this 6,500 kilometer rail line between Islamabad and Istanbul, traveling through Tehran with many trips paths along the way, both for passengers and for freight. But up until 2022, for a decade between 2012 and 2022, this was shut down due to pressure from the US, the British, and the so-called free rules-based order onto Pakistan to say, and to Turkey, that no, if you do any kind of business or cooperation with Iran, that you'll be sanctioned to death, your people will die, and they were pressured to back out of it and shut this rail down. As of mid-2022, it was reactivated. And not only was it reactivated, but this connects deeper into, here I'm going to show an image here, very important. No, not this one yet. No, not this one yet. This one. This is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor featuring highways and rail. There's two major rail lines going from China down all the way into, on the one hand, Iran, but also with vectors going down into Afghanistan as well that are being built up. There's about $60 billion invested into this already, but it's not just rail and highways. These are a lot of highways that we're seeing, but coal, hydro, solar, wind, but also nuclear power. That's also being developed massively. The Chinese have invested in something like 10 gigawatts so far of much needed energy provided to Pakistan, with a big emphasis on coal fire plants, plus also nuclear. China's helped build up something like 8 nuclear power plants. They actually just made an announcement in July of 2023 to begin the largest nuclear power plant. This is what also Iran has been fighting for, is the right to utilize nuclear power. They were doing this since the 70s. This is what the Shah was trying to move towards with the help of Iranian, French, and German nuclear power companies as well. This was right before the Shah was overthrown and all of these projects were shut down as they were being mid-built. So this is what is being done there. The Belt and Road Initiative, like I said, it is so far created, just in Pakistan alone, over 300,000 jobs. It goes all the way down to the Gwadar port in the south, one of the world's biggest ports on the Indian Ocean. A lot of Western geopoliticians are trying to situate or make this port something that will clash with, that's the one, the Chabahar port and the Bandar Abbas port in south of Iran. These are part of what's called the International Transportation Corridor, which is something that was signed by Russia, India, and Iran back in 2001 originally, but due to all of the destabilizations of the Middle East after September the 11th, it really didn't get off the ground until 2017, where it really began to take flight again in the context of the Belt and Road Initiative. And in the West, a lot of the media is trying to frame this as a rival, opposing development against the Chinese-led Belt and Road Initiative, which is East-West development rail lines. And they're trying to say, oh no, see, Russia is competing with China. India hates China. So they're all trying to fight for control over Eurasia in opposition to China. Bunk crap, not true. When you actually look at it, this is very clearly all part of the same grand design, which, and again, they're trying to say the same thing, like Iran and Pakistan must be enemies because if Iran develops the Chabahar port and the Bandar Abbas port by bringing this massive 8,000 kilometer rail line, if it's completed, then all of a sudden they're going to take and steal all of that economic activity from Pakistan, which will hurt Pakistan. Now, the reality is the very opposite. This is going to benefit everybody, especially by building rail lines, and not just rail lines. This is actually, these are natural gas pipelines stretching from Turkmenistan and Iran, where there's massive oil fields, especially in Turkmenistan, that would provide a lot of vital energy to both to India, but also especially to Pakistan, but that bring all of these countries that are supposedly at war with each other, that hate each other, into great harmony. And these deals have already been signed. Originally, this is August 3rd, 2023, Iran and Pakistan ink a 5-year strategic plan for commercial cooperation. This also includes defense cooperation, securing the border, and ending terrorism in both countries. This is vitally important because this plays right into, even though 5 days later, what I just showed you was canceled, right? So this is, again, the same game. This is signed. You have the foreign ministers of Iran and Pakistan signing this 5-year commercial cooperation defense agreement. And then 5 days later, on August 8th, 2023, Pakistan announces they're going to cancel this long-awaited pipeline from Iran to Pakistan, even though half of it, all on the Iranian side, has already been built. And Iran is screaming, saying, "You're going to break our contracts and we're going to bring you to court." And it sounds like everything's going sour. And then at the end of November 2023, not only do they announce that it's going to actually be revived, but that they're going to add another pipeline going from India all the way up through Turkmenistan, through Afghanistan, via Pakistan. So you've got now an acceleration of a new pipeline that people weren't even thinking about, that was just being discussed, while at the same time they're going to revive and accelerate the already halfway built pipeline, which will unite Iran and Pakistan and India into a greater harmonization, which is definitely pissing off a lot of British imperialists and their American counterparts.
Isn't that such an amazing, that's like just that whole thing you just explained. I mean, this is, don't ever say that the Punjabi don't know how to do kayfabe, because man, are you familiar with kayfabe? Kayfabe,
No,
it's a term that Kyle Just Human popularized like a year or two ago. But it comes from like pro wrestling, like American pro wrestling, and basically it's like where it's like part of the theater. It's like when two people pretend to hate each other, but really they're working together, and then that's revealed later. So whenever we say kayfabe in the political context, we're talking about people who are feigning a conflict, but really they're working together. And this is one of the best examples of international kayfabe that we've probably seen in recent memory, is just this whole situation. What you just explained, this deal being signed in August 3rd of last year. 5 days later, it being canceled by Pakistan. And then in November, it comes back even bigger and better than ever, now connecting Turkmenistan to India. And if you go back to that map, if you can pull that map up real quick, the one of the Belt and Road Initiative, the larger one, you can see here how, like between Iran and Pakistan, those two gray countries, that's Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, you can see the opportunity, the economic opportunity for places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, places that haven't really been thought of. I mean, Afghanistan has not had an economy like ever really. I mean, it's just like goat herding is basically all they have, which is why it was so easy for the CIA to come in there and offer cash to people to join militias and fight for them for whatever cause they needed them to fight for.
Yeah.
And you can really start to recognize that. It's another thing worth noting. Pakistan is a nuclear power. They've had nuclear weapons since 1970s. They're one of the 9 countries in the world that has nukes, which is interesting. Like that's just an interesting dynamic to think of as you're thinking of like everything is. I know a lot of people like look at Pakistan and even Iran, which is not accurate at all to think of Iran in this context, but as like this really backwards, like third world country. But Pakistan has nuclear weapons, and there's a lot of truth to what like that thinking, but the point is like these initiatives that are being organized by China and other players really do offer like economic incentive and opportunities for these countries that are going to participate and be part of these roadways and trade routes, which has always been the case. Like historically, that's how Like if you have a city or a town that's along a trade route, that place is going to prosper if you manage your play your hand correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Here, let's go for a quick commercial break. Do you want to do the first? Did you say you're going to do the first two, or am I going to do the first two?
I can do the first two.
Okay. All right.
I got
cool.
I got it up right now. So it says Goldco. Tell me when you're ready.
All right, go for it.
All right. Trump is mentioning CBDC in recent speeches. Up until now, the digital dollar, or CBDC, has been nothing but a headline, but right now things are developing at a rapid pace. It started with a sweeping executive order from the Biden administration, and now central banks are even hiring for their development. Here's the thing: a digital dollar can be used to track your purchases, control what you buy, and even seize or freeze your assets. That's why it's critical you protect your money with precious metals like gold and silver. I've partnered with the top-rated Badlands has partnered with the top-rated precious metals company Goldco because they're a great company with an amazing reputation. Right now, they're giving you up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last. Plus, all qualified callers this week will receive a free Ronald Reagan silver coin. Don't wait until all of your money is under Biden's control. Go to badlandsgold.com to learn how you can get started today. That's badlandsgold.com.
Very good.
All right, and
no bugs beef.
No bugs beef. Badlanders have set no bugs beef on fire. Have you ordered yet? Let's face facts. America's supply chain is going to be increasingly disrupted in the coming months, which means it's not if we'll have a food shortage, it's when. Having enough protein to feed your family for several months is essential for your survival. That's why we've partnered with badlandsmedia.tv/nobugs. They provide sous vide, freeze-dried all-American beef from ranches in Texas that have never, ever given their cows an mRNA jab. The beef stored in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers for maximum shelf life will stay shelf stable for more than 10 years without refrigeration and with maximum nutrition and flavor. All you need to do is soak it in water for 15 minutes and it's ready to eat. These are not typical survival meals. They're premium cuts of ribeye, New York strip, tenderloin, sirloin, and chuck. Sorry, lost my spot. Get your family ready for the chaos at badlandsmedia.tv/nobugs and use the promo code Badlands for an additional 10% off of your order. That's badlandsmedia.tv/nobugs, promo code Badlands.
Great. Okay, cool.
Sorry, Excel was messing with me. And everyone, please hit the thumbs up. That's a big help if you're enjoying the show. It's a big help for us to get the thumbs up here. It lets us monitor engagement, track engagement, maybe even get on the leaderboard on Rumble. So hit that for us.
Cool. All right. Just to go back to some of these important things, to let it just sink in, because this is another mapping of the Belt and Road Initiative. And keep in mind, this is not like a set in stone thing for people watching this. It's a very flexible concept, and this is just one of several corridors. There's a northern corridor that goes straight up through Mongolia, through Russia, into the Russian Arctic, the Far East, where there's co-investments with India, Korea, both Koreas, Japan in the far Arctic east of Russia, where all of these countries of Asia are working together on pipelines like the Power of Siberia 1, 2. There's so many different natural gas and mining projects going on right now, which is bringing together nations who are supposed to be rivals and enemies with each other, who are actually finding a harmonization of common interest due to the vast abundance. And Russia, keep in mind, has made this a top priority to open up what they call their region of manifest destiny, of the Eastern Front, kind of like the West in the 19th century America was "Go West, young man." That was the idea of the healthier kind of manifest destiny to open up the continent for development and growth. That's sort of how Russia's also looking at it, but they're doing it just as China's doing their Western development strategy as well through their BRI. They're doing it in a way that doesn't involve a lot of the mistakes and bloody messes that were made in the case of the United States, where way too often did we disobey treaties that we signed with natives. We crushed a lot of native cultures, put them into little reservations as concentration camps. It was really racist and bad. So that made a lot of bad blood that's coming back generations later to bite us in the ass. Whereas there's a very different approach that involves a much more sensitivity to the smaller ethnic minority groups that all are expected to become engineers and build these things together, as we see in Xinjiang, where there's hundreds of thousands of people becoming expert skilled tradesmen. We have the same thing in Pakistan too, where there's a lot of trade schools being opened up that are creating highly skilled workers, engineers who are going on to build these things. But I wanted to say something very quickly regarding this guy here. This guy is so on the left hand we got Hossein Amir Abdul Hayyan is the Iranian foreign minister. Some of these names tongue twisters for me. But the guy on the right, he's Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. And this young guy was born in 1988. Young fellow, foreign minister of Pakistan. Very interesting guy. Have you looked at the Bhutto family at all?
I have not. Bhutto.
Yeah. So he's the son of Benazir Bhutto, who was the prime minister of Pakistan twice in 1988 to 1990 and again in 1993 to 1997. And she was running again, was about to win the prime ministership in 2007 when she was murdered. So there's her on the upper left-hand side. That's his mother. Again, keep in mind, right? For these are very conservative Islamic cultures that we have been told are very misogynistic. There's no space for women. They all have to like walk around and like, you know, they're having their skin covered all the way down to their ankles. Fact is, in this, there's something that's being missed. There is a problem of misogyny. That's true. But some of the most powerful freedom fighters who became political leaders were also women. In the case of Benazir Bhutto, she was a major reformer, fighting to revive and really push back against the Anglo-American ISI, the Pakistani intelligence operations that had been working to promote narcotics traffic since the 1960s, really. So she was a major reformer. She was gunned down, killed. His father, this guy, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, his father is Asif Ali Zardari, and that's Zardari, the president. Sorry, the president of Pakistan. On the left-hand side, shaking hands with Medvedev, who was at that time president of Russia, and you have the heads of Afghanistan there, and I think this is the head of one of the stands, Tajikistan probably, who are all working very hard to create this Eurasian economic development complex back in 2008. He was walking a very fine line because this is before there was a Belt and Road Initiative. The Russia-China alliance was a lot weaker than it became later on. He was like sort of trying to stay alive. He was the first president, just to get a sense of the volatility of Pakistan. He was the first president who was able to live out his entire 5-year term as president. Even right, that never happened since Pakistan was formed in 1947 by the British, who carved it up artificially and created an environment where they extracted all of the Muslims who had been living in a diffused way. Of course, you had a Muslim majority living in what became Pakistan, but there were Muslims all over living in great harmony with their Hindu and Sikh fellow Indians. And the British worked hard for a year to extract all of the Muslims, bring them into Pakistan and tell them, okay, this is going to be your country now, as well as there was an East Pakistan that later on became Bangladesh. Very artificial creation in some ways. And then at the same time, all of the Hindus and Sikhs who were living in those areas that became Bangladesh and Pakistan, they were extracted. And there are at least 2 million people were killed along the way. Probably a lot more because there were no censuses being done. But the British organized all of this, these ethnic divide and hostilities between each other. So you have this guy has two parents who are both leaders of Pakistan working to create economic cooperation with their neighbors and to undo this damage of British intrigue over the years by finding points of economic development. And then his grandfather is there on the right side with Indira Gandhi, and that's Zulfikar Bhutto. And he was the prime minister in the 70s, and Indira Gandhi was the president of India, or the prime minister of India, in that same period of time from 66 to 1979, and then again from 1980 to 84 when she was assassinated. Again, British Anglo-American hand all over her assassination using proxies that were tied to a separatist terrorist group. But they were working together to also undo the tension that the British created to make sure that they could get constant forever wars between Muslim-dominated Pakistan and Hindu-dominated India. So they were doing a variety of things. Also, both were big fighters for economic independence through nuclear power. Both of them did that. They both oversaw bringing both those countries into a nuclear alliance. They signed even deals that no matter what future hostility might be provoked, that they would never attack each other's nuclear power sector, military or civilian. And when Zulfikar Bhutto was murdered, he was overthrown in a military coup in 1977. He was kept in jail for over nearly 2 years. And he was hung by somebody who was tied to BCCI, the 10th biggest bank in the world, that was created in 1971 and immediately becomes the 10th biggest bank. And this bank is what was behind all of, or the vast majority of the narcotics trafficking, the terrorist funding, the financing of the Mujahideen in these Afghan radicalizing mosques. These were all done through BCCI funding. It finally was shut down in the 90s, but it was huge. And his enemy was this guy, General Zia, who he worked very closely. He was the president of the BCCI Foundation, the guy who overthrew him in the military coup, and then found him guilty with like this massive, just fake, it was a fake court hearing. They just made up evidence. They killed him, and then, but before he died, like weeks before he died, he wrote his sort of memoirs to the world that were never published by the West. The only Western publication that published them in 1979 was EIR. And this is where I got this from. So this is his words in a sort of a message to the world, saying like why he's in this situation where he's about to die in a couple of weeks. And he says, we were on the threshold of full nuclear capability when I left the government to come to this death cell. We know that Israel and South Africa have full nuclear capability. The Christian, Jewish, and Hindu civilizations have this capability. The communist powers also possess it. Only the Islamic civilization was without it. But that position was about to change. Dr. Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State for the United States, has a brilliant mind. He told me that I should not insult the intelligence of the United States by saying that Pakistan needed the reprocessing plant for her energy needs. And he's here talking about a pebble bed nuclear reactor that would reprocess spent nuclear fuel that could then be used again. And so you don't have to bury it, which is one of the big arguments against nuclear by the anti-nuclear lobby, is that, oh, but we're burying the nuclear waste. We can't do anything with it for millions of years. Do you want to condemn future generations? Bunk. You can reprocess it and close the fuel cycle. That's what America was about to do in the 70s when Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski oversaw the cancellation, and James Schlesinger with the Trilateral Commission. They canceled that under Carter. They stopped the closing of the nuclear fuel cycle, but Pakistan was going to do it. Russia was helping because Russia has the pebble beds. And then so he was going to do that. And that's where Kissinger basically gave him a threat saying, no, you have to stop or else we're going to do something about this and you won't live. So he says in reply, I told him, Kissinger, that I will not insult the intelligence of the United States by discussing the energy needs of Pakistan, but in the same token, he should not insult the sovereignty and self-respect of Pakistan by discussing the plant at all. The general, that he's Zia, got the lemon. Limbo from the president of France. Pakistan got the laddu. These are foods. It's delicious foods in Pakistani cuisine. The PNA got the halva. It's a dessert. I got the death sentence. So very clearly getting across that this is at the heart of why he was overthrown in the military coup, why BCCI, the drug bank, that again, the Mujahideen were given sanctuary by the CIA that had their Pentagon and CIA outposts in Pakistan and in West China in 1977, 78, 79, overseeing the Mujahideen's growth that were then used to blow up the Middle East, create Al-Qaeda, and sucking the Russians into a wasting war that worked pretty well. And this is what's being brought back again with the discussion for energy independence on oil pipelines, natural gas, coal, saying screw you to the COP21 or whatever, COP29 or 28, whatever we're at, protocols for decarbonization. and no nuclear. When you see China going in saying, okay, fine, we'll decarbonize by, or we'll have a carbon neutral economy by 2050, sure, but we're going to do it through nuclear power. And by the way, we're going to burn a lot of coal and natural gas along the way. And by the way, we're going to get out of the Paris Accords, and you should too. And China got out of the Paris Accords last year, and said that pretty much we all have the ability. They just demonstrated that every sovereign nation, if you're a sovereign nation, you don't have to do what they're doing in Europe or North America to shut down farmers, to shut down fertilizers, to shut down coal and natural gas. You don't have to do any of that. You could just simply say it's not a legally binding contract. We wrote it, it was written by traders. It doesn't mean anything. If we follow that contract, it'll kill us. So we're not going to do it because we're a sovereign country. That's it. It's not that hard at the end of the day.
Huh. Yeah, that's dude, that really makes me, the next thing that I want to bring up, because I think it ties into that and I want to get your reaction to it, is I was just trying to find the right tab that I had it pulled up on, was the removal of Khan as the leader of Pakistan. And what are your thoughts on that? Because I know that the allegations that have been thrown around, this is the one that let me share my screen.
Yeah, that's also something I've been thinking about as well. Because Imran Khan had a lot of good qualities about him. He was definitely working. Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
alliances.
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar, the Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan, I'm sure a lot of people may have seen like the recent interview. I think Tucker Carlson interviewed him. A few other people did as well. That those interviews went viral. But basically, he was the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and he left office, I believe, in 2022. And what this story from The Intercept is saying is that all will be forgiven, said a U.S. diplomat, if the no confidence vote against Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan succeeds. And so what this story details is that what happened was the Pakistani parliament held a vote of no confidence in Khan, and so he was removed from office. And what they're saying is these leaks prove that the U.S. officials were the one from the State Department, probably CIA as well, were responsible for facilitating that vote against him and removing him from power. And so, it just the whole anecdote that you were just sharing just made me think of this, and made me wonder. I'm interested to pick your brain a little bit, because you have I think you have a much better handle on this region than I do. Because this is a totally separate region, in my opinion, from Arabia, which is really where my focus has been. And what's going on in Pakistan, to me, it seems like, we're going to speculate a little bit here, but to me, it seems like Pakistan is almost having this like internal struggle where they are, and I think a lot of nations around the Middle East and frankly the world are going through this right now, where they have this deeply embedded deep state, like the American deep state, the Anglo deep state, whatever you want to call it. The British deep state has been so embedded in their society for so long, for the past century at least, that they're trying to root all that out, like pull all that out. At the same time, they have to maintain like foreign diplomacy, international diplomacy. They have to keep up optics, but they also have to not piss off the deep state enough as they do it to get backlash, which is, I think, maybe what happened to Khan. But maybe that's why you're seeing like Iran and Pakistan bombing each other as opposed to bombing themselves, like bombing the militants in their own country, because then it would have been Pakistan bombing Iranian militants and Iran bombing Pakistani militants. Instead, they were bombing their own militants just on foreign soil. And the interesting part about that is that the way that's being reported by the Associated Press is they're leaving out some very, very important details about that. Like they're acknowledging the fact that Pakistan was bombing Pakistanis and Iran was bombing Iranians, but they're leaving out the fact that these groups have ties to U.S. intelligence and things that are being openly discussed on like the Cradle and other outlets that are being a lot more honest about the facts. It's just very interesting that you're seeing that. So I'm just wondering what you're thinking about that.
It's a tough one, honestly. I it's not as clear cut. Like, you know, you could see a greater fault line between the traitors in like America's case within the deep state and the patriots. It's a lot more easy, even though the patriots are often confused, are often disorganized, and can sometimes act like their own enemies. But despite that, you could sort of get a sense of where the humans are, who care about world peace and stopping their nation from collapsing, versus the death cult technocratic traitors, and you could sort of smell it pretty clearly. Same thing for Europe. In the case of places like India and Pakistan, it's a little bit more complex. There are evil, like very, very specifically British, Anglo-American, you know, imperial local controllers with multi-generational mini oligarchies that are tied to intelligence operations that are absolutely traitors, that are wired to rape, pillage, destroy, extract from their own country in order to be honored to be local slaves to control that region for their masters and be rewarded gratuitously. Like they will have all of the hedonistic desires that they could imagine and more satisfied as long as they murder their local peasants in that jurisdiction. So you have that. You have certain families that I think mostly are groomed, like the Ul Haq family of Pakistan is a major family, which every generation it seems to produce a lot of very powerful bad actors who are totally loyal to Western commands against the interests of their people. But then you have all these different factions who often don't like each other, but they're not interested in destroying their country either. So in the case of like Khan, I like Khan, you know, I like Imran Khan. He spoke in a very clear-cut way, and he was doing things that I could see are trying to bring Pakistan into greater harmony with China, with the Belt and Road Initiative, with Iran. He's making moves, but then he's overthrown in what looks to be a U.S. directed operation. The following government all of a sudden makes pro-U.S. military deals, allowing an expansion of U.S. military operations in Pakistan. So you're like, kind of see that that's probably not a coincidence. But then at the same time, it doesn't seem like the government that replaced him was an absolute traitorous government either, because they're playing this game, and everything that I went through was all post Imran Khan, everything that I did in my presentation. So it shows you that there's still patriots who are having to walk some fine lines in a very dangerous situation. And this guy who's like in his 30s, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, he's such an interesting character. I've listened to a few of his interviews to get a sense of him. And like, you know, he was accused by a BBC interviewer of being engaged in nepotism, basically like having a form of government based on family connections. And you know, he was asked in a belligerent way by the interviewer, like, how do you feel about being a nepotist? And he's like, look, man, I didn't choose this life. This life chose me. And when you look at his family, it's like, that's not an easy life to live. Like, his mom got killed, his grandpa got killed, his uncle got killed, his other uncle got killed. Like, to be born into a family that's part of a national resistance movement puts a lot of your conscience is going to be invigorated, and you're going to be tied to something very noble. As I think many people have noted that many Kennedys, John F. Kennedy Jr., had that strong sense of conscience, that deep identity connected to a study and love and respect for his uncle and father, which is why they had to kill him. But it's not a safety net. You know, you're not going to live like a Hunter Biden, popping from prostitute to prostitute, doing drugs, thinking that you're actually it's a terrible life. But he has like a form of like, he's not going to be worried about like the CIA killing him unless
he has like a golden hammock, golden parachute kind of silver spoon kind of situation. And I look at the Hashemites who ruled Jordan. I look at them kind of a similar way, where they, I think, are thought of that way in some respects. And they've all been most of them have been killed off, all except for really the king of King Abdullah of Jordan right now. So yeah, I know what you're saying, and I want to share this real quick. I just want to share this map just to think about this real quick. Was because I think this is like a really because even though this is a separate area, Persia and Arabia has been where I've focused a lot of my ideas. Qatar, when this is I apologize, it's a little bit of a blurry map, but Qatar right here, here's Pakistan. This whole region, like the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, has always been a very, very active trade area going back really thousands of years. And so this is one of the oldest waterways in terms of trade. And then also when we talk about Pakistan and we talk about India, this area up here versus Arabia, which really has only piqued the interest of, like the British Anglo cabal or whatever over the past century, maybe 150 years. This area over here goes back to, what we were talking about with the East India Company. And like the Sassoon family, which is like the opium, they call them the Rothschilds of India, the big opium oligarchs. And so that kind of ties into what you're saying, where you have multi-generational families that are tied to these intelligence operations, and are complete traitors to their people and are just subjugating. And those people absolutely exist. You also just have bad people that are just everywhere in the world. You can find in any culture who are just going to be opportunists and try to capitalize on bad situations and get theirs while they can. So that's happening as well. But yeah, I mean, the reason I asked that question is it just makes me think about, up until now, and we talked about this at the beginning, like a lot of these groups are probably being backed by Western intelligence, by bad, nefarious actors. I also am starting to kind of look at some of these groups that are because some of them probably are actually freedom fighter groups, not the ones that are like ISIS, but some of them. And I just can't help but wonder how many of these groups are actually acting in earnest and doing and actually trying to fight back against the CIA. I saw that TASS, which is TASS, which is a Russian news outlet, reported the other day that the Islamic Resistance, which is like an Iranian, like a Shiite militia operating in Syria and Iraq, blew up a CIA headquartered base the other day in Iraq. And so you have stories like that, and it's hard to know what's what. And so there's a lot of fog of war happening, and I don't think we should get too bogged down in who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. I think you focus more on who's working in earnest to try to like stabilize the world and bring about a peaceful civilization, world community. But anyway.
Well, yeah, look, I'll say it's so important to be able to use a method. I think of it as the Platonic method, because Plato, if you read his dialogues, they're wonderful dialogues. It's really good, like mind exercises. But what he's teaching one to do is learn how to think about thinking. So what's potent thinking? What's the art of asking the right kind of questions and then examining your core assumptions to see why a paradox is emerging about a discussion regarding like what's the nature of courage or justice or virtue or whatever, true knowledge versus simple opinion wearing the costume of knowledge. What's the difference? Subtle questions, but through a dialectic process, he's teaching you how to have a dialogue with your own mind, right? How to and to reserve judgment until you've really examined everything that you could possibly think about. Examine all other hypotheses that explain something that you're trying to make sense of. So think about the fact that you have your hypothesis, but at the same time, what are other hypotheses that may have taken into consideration a broader spectrum of reality than what you have, that have maybe a different assumption than what you have, and that maybe is something you would prefer to take on instead of a flawed set of hypotheses that you've been maybe born into or that experts have told you is the cool thing to have as an opinion. And so there's this constant importance to, again, have a nuanced approach to history, because if you think about it, what you just said is so important. Sometimes groups, most of the people within a lot of the things that are called like Hamas or the things that we've been told are like, we're given this very simplistic label of terrorist group. I would say that most of the people are not necessary, they're themselves expendable. They're people who've been born into despair. They've lived in a lot of injustice. They're alienated from a variety of things for right reasons in many ways, because they've been exploited and they've suffered so much that there's this anger, this desire for revenge, all of the stuff that's the consequence of living under an empire. And then a few people at the top, at the very, very top, will be aware. Like, let's say some of these billionaires in Qatar who have a huge amount of influence over Hamas, but they're willing to kill the majority of people who are within Hamas, who really just want to protect their fellow Palestinians from injustice. But they're willing to kill their fellow Hamas people and volunteers and other things in favor of a geopolitical end that they've worked out with their Anglo-American and Zionist intelligence collaborators, who use them and will reward them with a lot of money. They're billionaires, for Christ's sakes, in Qatar, right? And they're tied to Muslim Brotherhood. So you'll have people who will sometimes emerge and break from profile. Occasionally, it happens, and we have examples of that in India. Like, the Indian Congress Party had a lot of good, courageous people who gave their lives for the sake of freedom against the British Empire. But the India Congress Party was created by British theosophists like A.O. Hume in the 19th century and was overseen by people like Annie Besant, a Luciferian working with, the follower of Blavatsky, as an occultist, who was the president of the India Congress Party after World War I, right? So, and she's overseeing networks and cells of groups, some of whom are bomb-throwing Bolsheviks who are just supposed to just like overthrow the governing order by all means, including terrorism. Other ones are people like Gandhi, who don't want to take that path, but he's super soft in other ways. And they're creating an environment where the true integrated, like, sort of the type of resistance that we had last seen in 1857, where you had Muslims, right? That was the last Mughal ruler who was Muslim. The Muslims ran India, or were the majority influencer of India for about 1,000 years, since the 9th century, all the way till like the British entering the scene. And the last Mughal emperor worked to reinstate the Mughal rule and oust the British in 1857. But it wasn't just the Muslim force who were fighting the British. It was Hindu, it was Sikh, everybody working together to say, let's get the British East India Company out of here. And they were put down, annihilated. The British oversaw something like 24 mass genocides, controlled famines that killed upwards, we don't even know, but probably easily into the 40, 50 millions over the course of 200 years of dominance. So this is the sort of thing that the theosophists were deployed to try to make sure that never happens again. In some cases, you'll promote bomb throwers. In some cases, and assassins. In some cases, you'll promote radical pacifists who will never fight for anything. In other cases, you'll promote Nazi collaborators, which is why these theosophists were so quick to want to work with Hitler, right? And the swastika came from India for a reason. It was Blavatsky who popularized it in the West and brought it into these occult networks that gave rise to the Nazi high command of the SS Thule Society that used the Nazi symbol, the swastika, for theosophical reasons. And so you had a lot of pro-Nazi Indians at the time through that operation that was also working to keep ultimately India in a controlled state of divide to conquer. So you have these things, but good people did emerge. I can't deny that there were not wonderful good people who, confused as they might be, they were confused people. They were human first and ideological second. And the same thing in the Bolsheviks with Lenin and Trotsky and a lot of the leaders of the Bolsheviks. It wasn't one thing. It was like, if you look at it, what was receiving money from the Wall Street and London apparatus to overthrow and destabilize Tsarist Russia, it was like dozens of different warring factions. The empire just wanted to create chaos. And they would use poor people who were disenfranchised and who would be weaponizable to do it. They were the empire manipulating that. They knew that they were also taking a risk, because one or two of those factions might actually be patriots who didn't want to go along with a total depopulation agenda, which in the case of Russia, we saw huge fights. I mean, in the West, we're not told of any of these internal fights after the Bolsheviks took control. We're just told, oh, that was it. It was one thing, and then that's the global supervillain that we should all be afraid of. but if you actually take the time to look, there were so many internal fights within, internal assassinations of Mensheviks versus Bolsheviks versus other subgroups, and Bakunites, who are anarcho-syndicalists, actually libertarians, who were also part of the Bolshevik movement, who were fighting against the Kropotkinites, who were these groups following Peter Kropotkin, who were also working with Bertrand Russell and H.G. Wells and the Fabians and the Theosophists in Russia. So it's such a mess. And it happened to be the case that some of the better nationalists were able to strategize and organize people like Lenin or Stalin. I think Lenin was actually assassinated. I think Lenin was actually killed in 24 because he was working to try to revive a pro-industrial, like he brought electrification to the poor. He didn't want to continue this idea of global revolution. He just wanted to focus on the idea of just try to make an economy work in Russia. And he was working with, Warren Harding, who also died that same year. And what's his name? Yeah.
That was the same reason that Mohammed bin Salman's grandfather, the British, tried to overthrow him with the original Muslim Brotherhood, is that he had no interest in continuing the jihad outside of Saudi Arabia. But they all wanted to keep going into Jordan and Iraq and everything. And he said no. And so that's when they started like doing the raids, and then he had to go to war with them and crush them. Same kind of thing. It's like, I don't want this to be a global thing. I don't want this to be like this isn't like a campaign of conquest. Like, we've done what we need to do. We've negotiated peace with our neighbors. It's time to focus on prosperity and building civilization. So fascinating. I don't know if you have any final thoughts. I was going to run through some final thoughts. Let me react to what you just said, and then I'll pass to you for final thoughts. Then
react, and then commercial, and then final thoughts.
Oh yeah. Good. Because we need to do a commercial. Okay. Real quick, let me just show the. You just talked about India, so I want to do. Can you see my screen? This Twitter.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, so India is actually having a Hindu revival right now, which is cool. They rebuilt this, the Ram temple in Ayodhya. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but this looks amazing. I saw this the other day, and I'm my background's architecture. I've always found like traditional architecture like amazing and beautiful, like ornate. And just look at how they've rebuilt this temple. This is the interior, and then I'll show you the exterior.
Wow. Oh, it's so elaborate. Wow. Beautiful.
So I don't really know the history of that, but my understanding is that temple was somehow destroyed at some point, and so there's like this major like religious revival happening in India right now, especially with Hindus. So there's this major celebration happening. They're calling it the Great Awakening, which is funny because that's what people in America are calling our political revolution. I love the way that architecture is built with the lighting incorporated into the ornate detailing. And really, just to react to what you were just saying, I just wanted to share like these headlines real quick. This is from February. It's from a year ago, February 23. Russia was accusing the U.S. of supporting ISIS-K. So ISIS-K is ISIS that operates out of Pakistan. And this was a big revelation for a lot of like the Badlands audience, because this was where Kyle Was Just Human had talked about the Doha Agreement years ago and how important that was. That was the agreement signed in Doha in Qatar between Trump and the Taliban, saying that Trump was going to give Afghanistan back to the Taliban in exchange for the Taliban hunting terrorists who were using that region to, cultivate their activities, meaning really the CIA and its partners. And so then after that attack that happened at the gate at the Bagram Air Force Base during the U.S. withdrawal, the media tried to blame that on the Taliban, but really it was ISIS-K who did it. And it wasn't the Biden administration who went after the perpetrators. It was actually the Taliban who went, and that's what blew that whole thing up. And that happened right around this time, a year ago. And then you have the same author who just wrote the story that we were talking about at the beginning here back in October. How much more of this Taliban can Pakistan take? And this is because the Taliban were going into Pakistan and basically are just giving ISIS-K hell. and all these different groups that are operating in Pakistan. And so and then here you go, right here, you remember when the October 7th attack happened, there was that article or that news narrative about the Taliban asking Iran permission to go through Iran to get to Israel so they can help Palestine. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the Minister of Interior Affairs of Afghanistan. He's from the Taliban. This is on October 5th, 2023. I'm not going to play it because he's speaking Farsi, but he says, "We don't intend to interfere in anyone's internal affairs. We are saddened by Israel's cruelty against Palestinians. We wish them the best." So it's like here's him saying that. He's like, "Yeah, we're not coming. Like, this is all BS. The Western media is lying. We have no intention of crossing Iran and coming into to fight Israel." So anyway, it's just very, very fascinating that these things that we've been told our whole life, like my whole life, been told the Taliban are terrorists. Turns out they're not really terrorists. They're the guys who fight terrorists. They're the ones who are actually fighting for their country. Doesn't mean that their culture and our culture are in perfect alignment, but that's for them to figure out, not for us to tell them how to live. So,
well, that's another great example based on what I was just saying about how certain, like, where the Taliban was there an effort to create an ultra neurotically orthodox variation of Islam in Afghanistan in a way to destabilize the government, helped out by foreign agencies in the 70s and 80s, that the Taliban definitely grew an influence around? Yes.
That would follow the model of Arabia and Iran. That's
exactly. Or are they really regressive on women and not want to allow women to have an education? Well, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, yeah. But did they follow profile of exactly what they were expected to do? Well, they shut down the opium fields, which is like 90% of the world's heroin, because they recognized that that's sinful to allow that poison to go out into the world. So they shut that down. And that was the first thing that NATO reactivated as soon as we bombed Afghanistan back to the Stone Age. We made sure that those heroin fields were up and running again, providing 90% of the world's heroin supply, facilitated by the labs that were protected by the Canadian and British and American military in the Helmand province. We did that. We were overseeing the labs that turned it into heroin. We were overseeing the shipment routes that brought it into North America, that brought it into Russia, that brought it into Europe. We're the ones who did that. We called it all morphine, and the U.S. government military bought it all up, and then still brought it right into the black markets, facilitated by the same drug banks like HSBC that were doing this back in the 70s. They were still at it again after we did the war on terror. And now the new Taliban are a slightly different thing. They're Taliban, which we've seen that they've been able to change with the times. They're less neurotic on the issue of like the inferiority of women. They're allowing women education, which, it's 21st century. Thank you. But, Saudi Arabia too, they just finally allowed women a chance to drive a car, late in the game, but still it's progress, right? Like, should America have abolished slavery a lot sooner than it did? Yeah, probably, but it did. It's called the fight for progress. It happens in time, and sometimes it takes frustratingly long, but you can't ignore the upward trajectory when it's happening.
Well, we talked about Davos a little bit last week. We won't go back to it, but I did cover yesterday on Balance Daily or Monday that MBS appointed a Saudi princess as like one of the chief diplomats, and she went to some discussion and she like stole the show with her spiel. She gave like a 45-second rant where she talked about the vision, like Vision 2030, which is what MBS has been working on since 2015 to modernize Saudi. And she was basically like, we can't do this unless we stabilize the region, which means getting rid of all these militants, which means getting rid of y'all need to trust us. We know what we're doing. We have to get rid of all these bad actors in order to stabilize the region so we can bring prosperity and usher in the next era of this region. And totally stole the show. Everyone was blown away by it. And it's like, and I'm sitting there in the background, like, does everyone realize that a woman just got up and said that? Like, a woman just got up and told a room full of men from Saudi that this is what they're going to do, and y'all need to basically shut up and get in line. Like, y'all need to trust us that we know what we're doing. And no one's talking about, no one wants to point that out, that like a Saudi princess just got up and told a room of the most powerful men in the world how it's going to go down, and that they need to basically get with the program.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. All right, let's we'll go into some final thoughts, but first a word from Van Man Company. So I'll do the next two reads here. Van Man Company. What's this? Have you had enough big pharma and big toxic ingredients? Ditch the harsh chemicals and embrace nature with us. For too long, we have been hypnotized by big companies into using their chemical slop products. Their clever marketing campaigns and heavy lobbying allow them to use words like natural to describe products that are anything but. Meet the Van Man Company, where we're all about natural organic remedies. Hop in the van and try our famous tallow and honey balm as a daily face and full body moisturizer. Use our miracle tooth powder made from ground eggshell and ground cattle bone to remineralize and naturally whiten your teeth. And try our new coconut magnesium deodorant to keep you smelling fresh all day. We got you covered, and we do it with products sourced naturally from American farms and made in San Diego, California. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/vanman today and get a free shipping on all orders over $40. That's it. Vanman. Interesting. Eggshells. Okay, next one. So this one is a oof. Let's just restart that. Took me a while to. Okay, restart. Okay, it's the perfect time to grab a few bottles of Flying Gang rum. Flying Gang rum is meticulously produced from pure Florida sugarcane, aged to perfection in ex-bourbon barrels, and then select cask finished. A rum so pure it comes with no added sugar, colors, or artificial flavorings. That's right, it's pure rum. They're on a mission to change how we perceive sipping rum. To Florida, it's what wine is to Napa, bourbon to Kentucky, whiskey to Tennessee. This iconic rum is all about elevating the connoisseur's experience, capturing the rich history and unique character of handcrafted rum. And now, for a limited time, Badlanders will get $20 off of their purchase over $100 with promo code BADLANDS. That is promo code BADLANDS.
Awesome. So before we do final thoughts, let me just hit one thing we haven't really done is Rumble Rants. And the past few weeks we've had we've actually pre-recorded the show, so it wasn't live. This is live right now. So I actually I watched the show live, and if anyone gave a Rumble Rant last week, I copied it. I have it saved. I didn't do it the week before because I was traveling, but so I have all those saved. Let's go ahead and run through those real quick.
Sure. Yeah, we never do that. This is the first time we've done a Rumble Rant.
I know. So the first one comes from Aloha 2021. That's from today. $50. I'm enjoying your analysis and facts because we are starving for this information. Great work. Well, thank you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your generous rant.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me pull up. Share screen. Okay. And then so we have here the rant. I just emailed this to myself. You can see my screen.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Astro Emmy, $5. I don't think a two-state solution is possible as long as those ruling Palestine are hell-bent on destroying Israel. Fair point, but just depends on who's actually hell-bent on destroying whom is the real question there. And Trump has actually said in the past that he was surprised when he met with Abbas, who's the Palestinian president, at how gentle and warm he was, and he was really disappointed when he met with Netanyahu. After 3 minutes, he said he could tell that Netanyahu didn't want a two-state solution, which, by the way, he came out this past weekend and admitted he doesn't want a two-state solution. So we'll see. Anyway, Astronomy again, $17. The more global the government, the farther removed it is from the individual and the less personal sovereignty we have. Absolutely. That is the crux of the argument that occurred in the 1780s when they were trying to figure out the Constitution. It was local government versus federal government, states' rights versus the federal authority. So, yeah, great. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're zeroing in on the battle of human history is balancing that harmonic chord that unites both the sacredness of the individual right to liberty with the well-being of the whole that we're parts of, like cells in a body, right? Every cell is organized to play a role within. There's a division of labor within the body. The cells in the heart do different things than the cells in the liver, but they all have to work in harmony with each other towards the well-being of the entire person. So, I mean, we're part, we come into this world, right? We're born, we die, we played a role within a broader continuum. And that continuum is shaped by ideas based on, either concepts that are evil or true, and courageous people who use their free will to act or not act according to either set of ideas that results in either having more people living at a higher quality of life with greater access of their creative faculties, who can produce things like that beautiful temple that Gordon showed us. That is not something that can be done by slaves living in a degenerated slave culture. That's something that is really of a higher order human capacity. And you go to Washington D.C., or first of all you go to like Italy, right? You look at the Italian Renaissance, these beautiful buildings, and wonder, why can't we do this today? It's gorgeous. Everything is gorgeous. And just, it took a very long-term thinking with a very high standard of excellence in your execution of these cathedrals. And or even, again, the painful irony of walking through Washington, D.C. and seeing these beautiful Greco-Roman buildings with beautiful architecture and paintings inside of the congressional buildings and everything. And it's wonderful. And then you see the immoral rot of these subhuman freaks wandering around and not seeing what they're actually inheritors of. So I think what you're getting at has been that fight to get both the principles of the Declaration of Independence that enshrine the inalienable rights of all people as sacred, but at the same time, the principles of the constitutional preamble that put the general welfare as sacred. And it's like, it shouldn't be a fight of one or the other. It should be like both at the same time, which means that people have to be culturally, like John Adams said, right, very morally developed for their choices to be geared around what's morally right to do, and not what's just momentarily selfish desires, as some would have it, which is where John Adams said that the United States Constitution is built only for a moral and religious people, and it is wholly unfit for any other kind of people. It doesn't work, right? Unless you have that condition met.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's a great quote to pull up. Yeah, well, last one from Astro Emmy, $17. Wow, I love the history lesson I get from y'all. It really gives us understanding of how this globalist religion came to be. Yeah, well, it's been a lot of fun doing the show with Matt, because we've worked through some really interesting ideas, and I've actually learned a lot doing it, just because these exercises we go through, it's like you learn new details, new facts, and connect some dots that I didn't know before were connected.
Me too.
So thank you for that.
And thank you.
Yeah, and then shipping.
You were thanking both me and the person asking the question, because I honestly I would say the same thing. Like I've been doing a lot of shows for a long time, a lot of interviews, but every time you and I have one of these presentations, I always find myself having taken at least a page of notes, just of new things and new insights that I've gleaned from you. So again, this is a lot of fun.
For sure. Same here. Shipping Queen 1212, $20. Great show, and so nice to meet you, Gordon, and your beautiful wife at Guard 3. Great to meet you as well. Had a lot of fun out there. And then the last thing is we have Badlands Boost. So if y'all are not familiar with Badlands Boost, you go to badlandsmedia.tv. You click over here on Support Badlands, and then here on Badlands Boost, and it's kind of like a Rumble rant, but it just goes straight to Badlands as opposed to Rumble taking a cut. And so we have two of those. We have one actually going back from December 16th from JBA 512, $50. Love the show. Our history is where so much is hidden. So thanks for shining a light on it. This is a great way for us internationals who can't watch the shows live to give support directly. Well, thank you for that support, and thank you for the comment. So nice of you. And then Moonlight Girl, last one, January 10th, $25. When I'm listening to your show, it's like sitting next to the two smartest kids in the classroom. I was actually not really a great student. I was always really great at like test taking and stuff, but I wasn't really good at sitting still for 8 hours a day and like listening in a classroom. It wasn't until I really got into college and after college that I cultivated like a love for history. That's because I kind of developed my own way of looking at it, and that was not cultivated through the like schooling process. So just wanted to note that. Yeah. So, but thank you for that, Moonlight Girl, and thank y'all for your generous rants. We really, really do appreciate it. Everyone, please hit the thumbs up again. That really helps us try to get them a leaderboard. Matt, you have any closing thoughts for us on the Pakistan-Iran situation?
We've gone through so much. I think that I'm pretty satisfied that what was discussed, at least for my part, will probably linger and bubble and boil in people's minds, and hopefully provide a framework for people to do a lot more of their own research, because this history is so rich, and it's something I've unfortunately, like there's this joke, most Americans don't know where most nations are on the map until we've bombed them. It's unfortunate, and I'm guilty of this too, where I didn't take the time. If we hadn't bombed Afghanistan, going back 20 years, would I have been able to say where Afghanistan was? No, I'll say it. I didn't know much about anything about Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran or Pakistan, or the fact that the British carved up both countries to artificially keep them at war with each other. I didn't know about any of that stuff. So it's unfortunate that crisis does compel the mind to explore the unknown. But let's take advantage of that and do it well. And at the very least, do it in such a way that we can ensure that we pass on the type of educational experience that we should have had access to if we had a normal, healthy education system, which we didn't. We were just, we're born into an oligarchical society, all of us watching, whether we like it or not. It wasn't our fault, but there it was. And now we have to sort of fight for and develop a real love of discovery. And when we have that love animating our pursuit of the unknown, it takes on more value when you find it, when you capture that creature you were running for, trying to resolve paradoxes along the way. It has a deeper root foundation. It builds up it creates a foundation upon which you can architecturally build up in your soul an edifice which is durable, that's based on discovery, not opinion that I'm taking on to try to sound smart, to pass a trivia test or get on Jeopardy, or to sound smart at the office. That's a lot of the motives that I used to have, and a lot of us have, or about like gaining knowledge. But real knowledge comes from like a pursuit, a love of the good, and a desire to be our potential, to be our best self, knowing that our best self can live in a more clear way when we're animated by knowledge that is real and true, not by a lie or some half-assed imposter. So I just say, I think we're all, if people are here watching this program, they're already on that path. Great. Just keep it going, do source material. And thank you guys for all watching and supporting this show.
Very, very well said. Very, very well said. I will leave you the final thought. We have one more rant just came in. Divya, I hope I'm saying that right. Divya, 108, $20, bought all 4 of Matthew's books. Thank you guys. Your show is great. Well, thank you, Divya. That was I'm sure I've actually been reading one of the books that Matt sent me for Christmas as a Christmas present, and I'm really enjoying it. The one on the Venetians. Man, it's a really, really good book. So I'm only about 50 pages in, but man, I'm really enjoying it. So
it's made my day. All right, guys. Yeah. Well, thank you for buying those 4 books, and glad you're enjoying that ride. It can get a bit scary. It's a bit of a scary ride, but
it is. But it's a great book. So.
Yeah, you've tuned your mind for that ride.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, y'all have a good day. Thanks for watching. Hit the thumbs up, and we will see you next week.